Welcome aboard another installment of The Sages. My name is Benjamin Akakpo, and it's a great pleasure to host you. Now, I'm going to play a bit of a game with you as we start to see whether you can identify my guest today. Well, for starters, he was General Secretary of the People's National Party under Dr. Hilla Liman. General Secretary, do you think you know him? He's an author, proofreader, editor. Not too long ago, he launched his own book titled My Life. Do you have any idea yet? And if you still don't, how about this? He's an emeritus professor of chemistry, and he's been a one-time vice chancellor of the University of Ghana. I think we've narrowed it down enough, and you should be having a fair idea by now the person of whom I speak. He's a known face. He's a man who wears many hats. Ladies and gentlemen, Ghana4, I give you Emeritus Professor Ivan Addae-Mensah. He's my guest today on The Sages. Hello, Prof.
Thank you very much, Ben.
It's good to have you. And your CV, made me laugh when I took a look at it because it's a CV that is about 20 plus pages long. It tells you of what this man has done. But let's start from the very beginning, from the very start. You are 15 years and some 2 months older than Ghana is. And I know this is something you don't hide, so it's fine to bring it up. Let's talk about where you were born, the sort of family you were born into, and what your early childhood was like. And let me just let our viewers know as well that from time to time I'll be referencing this book, My Life, as I made mention of, that recent book by Professor Ivan Addae-Mensah, his autobiography, as we go along. So, Prof. Wasempa, over to you.
Yeah, well, before I tell you about my childhood days, let me just say that if you found my CV very long, then there's volume 1 of my autobiography, volume 1.
Right.
It's itself about 600 pages. And that's not even it just goes to the first 40 years of my life.
First 40 years of your life.
So,
up to the point of exile.
So you shouldn't be surprised that my CV,
your CV
is that long.
It just tells you of the caliber of person we're speaking to. But yes, let's get into your early childhood.
Yeah.
Where were you born?
I was born at Achimota.
Okay, in the eastern region.
Yeah, where my father and mother were both school teachers. My father was the headmaster of the local Methodist middle school, and my mother was what they used to call the domestic science teacher, what we now call the home economics. I think it's gone through a whole lot of other names. I think it's now called home economics. So I was born to school teachers, if I may put it that way, at Achimota Hospital. But we were actually resident in Akim Swedru, about 3 miles from Achimota. And Oda was the only place where there was a hospital. So in labor, my mother had to go to Achimota Hospital. That's why I always say that I was born at Achimota, because according to Ghanaian custom, you are born where your umbilical cord is buried. Okay. So even though that's not the law, but I prefer to say that I was born at Achimota.
I see. Let's talk about your family beyond this. Siblings?
Yeah, I am the last of 4 boys.
I see.
The first born didn't survive beyond 9 months.
Oh, my condolences.
Yeah, the second born became a professor of engineering, and he worked both in Germany as a professor and then worked with the CSIR in Ghana at the Forestry Research Institute. He was a civil engineer specialized in wood engineering. Unfortunately, he passed away in 2019. Oh. The third born is still alive. He's a surgeon. He was one time head of the Department of Surgery at KNUST Medical School. And I'm the last born.
And you're the last born, and you're
Yes.
excelling as well. I see that there are intellectuals in your family. The academic trait runs through. Where would you say you got it from? Was it the parents, or was it just this concept of education, education, education?
Well, my parents were educated, so naturally, and they were school teachers, so naturally all of us went to school.
Right.
It's not only my parents, but there were other relatives who had been to school. So I would say education was quite common within our family. But we also had our own problems, as you would realize later. Later on, life changed, and it changed very drastically.
And let's talk about those changes vis-a-vis your education, because you attended Achimota School, you went through the mill. Even Achimota School is way down the line, from elementary school and everything. How did you make it through? Okay,
I first became aware or conversant with my environment when my parents were at Shama.
Okay.
They were transferred to Shama for my father to start a middle school, Methodist middle school at Shama. So I remember at the age of 3 at Shama, the first time that my mother held my hand to take me to school. At that time, there was a semblance of a sort of kindergarten, but we didn't have a classroom to ourselves. We sort of used the veranda, and we were supervised by the class 1 teacher, Teacher Pedu, at that time.
The Teacher Pedu that you mentioned in your book.
Yeah, I mentioned him in my book.
Right.
But because he was very busy with the class 1 students, more often than not, we were left on our own.
To your own devices.
Yes. And so the lot fell on me and one Ebo Sam, who was the son of the class 3 teacher. Because we had sort of picked up a few things like counting from 1 to 10 or 1 to 100. And the others were sort of very green from, Shama was a small town at that time. We usually had the responsibility of handling the other children in the so-called kindergarten.
So you were the teacher of your colleagues
we had
when
the
you
power
yourself were.
Yes, we had the power to teach them and dismiss them as and when we wanted.
How old were you by this time?
3 years old.
3 years?
Yes, 3 years old.
Wow.
And then at the age of 4, we were transferred again to Abrodunkwa, where my father and mother continued teaching. Abrodunkwa didn't have that type of kindergarten. So I used to go to school because everybody else in the house, including even the house girls and other people who had been brought to my parents for to sort of go to school and learn some trade, because my mother also did some sewing of dresses and things to sell, and they were brought by their parents to come and learn these handicraft things. So everybody had to go to school, so there was no way I had to be left at home alone. So I would always accompany either my father or my mother to school and hang around their legs, what people used to call teacher ninahu, you know. But at the age of 5, I went formally into class 1 at Abrodunkwa. And my teacher at class 1 was an ex-serviceman, one teacher Hammond. He was a corporal during the Second World War. So he always came to the classroom with his military uniform. I don't know why he was allowed to wear military uniform to come and teach class 1 boys, but I believe... and
this happened throughout his teaching?
Yes.
Of your class?
Maybe it was part of the system of letting them wind down from the experiences of the Second World War. You know, with hindsight, this is what I think. You know, because they all come back with some trauma. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know whether he's one of those who fought in Burma.
Yeah, I don't know where he fought, but he's supposed to have been, you know, some of them were educated. So when they came, they tried to fit them into various things. He was teaching class 1, but he was a very good teacher.
I see. And then I just want to walk through academic work, and then we'll get into other substantive matters.
And then, from there, in 1948, when I was 6 years old, we were transferred again, this time to Addae-Mensah. And that is where things changed. I was in class 2 and class 3 at Addae-Mensah. But when I was in class 3, around May of 1949, my mother underwent some surgery, apparently as a result of complications in pregnancy. I was then seven years old. Unfortunately, things went wrong. Let me put it that way. And we lost my mother, our mother.
My condolences.
She was buried. She was buried in Sekendi. And we came back to Bisasi after the burial. But one misfortune after another. This was in May 1949. But one misfortune after another, and if you read the book, you'll find the details. The details are not very pleasant. So my father.
Just walk us through a bit of. I know it's like a wound we're opening again.
Well,
if you don't mind.
Well, at Bisasi, 48, 49, of course, living conditions in Bisasi at that time were not very, very good. There was no water, there was no toilet. My father had to build a toilet in the house in which we were, and all that. But when my mother died and we went away, we went to the burial and came back. Again in Bisasi, the landlord had another son who had some post-traumatic stress disorder. Also an ex-serviceman. And one day he attempted to shoot my father's only sister. My father suddenly fell ill after my mother's burial, and he just went down. So my aunt and my grandmother, my paternal grandmother, came to stay with my father, ostensibly to take care of him. I think it was the effect of my mother's death, the circumstances of my mother's death. He just went down. And so when there was this attempt on his sister's life by this man, out of the blue, we were in school when we heard a lot of noise coming from our house because we were living very close to the house, to the school. And we heard this gunshot. And then we saw my aunt running towards the school with this man chasing her with a gun and shouting that my aunt had beheaded his brother. That is the soldier's brother.
Right.
It must have been a manifestation of something that may have happened to him.
Some hallucination or something of the sort.
Yeah. So of course the man was overcome by the male teachers in the school. But then my father then decided that enough was enough. We should leave Bisasi. So in June of 1949, we left Bisasi for our hometown, my father's hometown, Exile.
Okay.
And in Exile, my father just continued deteriorating. And we were there, three of us, were just roaming around. My elder brother, the second born, the engineer I mentioned, he had been brought to Accra by my aunt, the one who had her life in danger from this man, ostensibly to stay with her and her husband, who was a nurse at Kolebu, and go to school. But later on, so it was left with me and my third brother to just be in Exile, roaming around there, doing nothing, not attending school. And for about 2 months, 3 months, we were still just running around there, going to the beach to help the fishermen, playing football.
Oh, you had that
doing
experience
sorts,
too,
yeah,
I see.
all sorts of things. And my maternal grandmother, who was then living at Taqua, heard about this and then came to Exile and insisted that she wouldn't allow us to just end our education like that. Because my father was not in any position to take decisions on what to do with us. So it was my paternal relatives who were concentrating on his illness. And we, the children, just didn't matter at all. So my maternal grandmother, Addae-Mensah, insisted that she would take us away. Eventually, they came to a compromise that Augustus, our second born, who ostensibly had become our firstborn, because I said the firstborn didn't survive, you know, they demanded that he should stay behind with my father so that he will run errands for my father. But my Addae-Mensah, my grandmother, insisted that if Augustus was going to stay in Exile, then he should be put in school.
Okay.
If they won't put him in school, she would not allow Augustus to stay. So they agreed, and Augustus went to the Exile Anglican School. And we were taken to Taqua. And when we got to Taqua, well, it was 5 months into the year, 5 months since June when we came to Exile. We hadn't been to school. And it was only 2 months to the end of the school year in December. And so there was no place in class 3 for me to go into. Fortunately, Lawrence, who was in, at that time, Standard 2, what we call class 5 now, he had a place in the Anglican school. He couldn't get a place into the Methodist school either. So the headmaster of the infant school took a very important decision on my behalf, and I say it's very important. He said I should be allowed into class 3 without my name being put in the register.
Wow. You were literally being snuck in.
Yes.
Snuck into the class.
And I had no table. I had no chair. The floor was my chair, and there was a little stool which was used for housecraft purposes. That became my table. But anytime there was somebody who was absent, I would just go and sort of take the person's chair and table and use. And the idea was that if at the end of the year I took the promotion exam with the other members of the class and passed, then I would be formally enrolled into the school and sent to Standard 1. And so for the 6 weeks or 2 months that I was at Taqua Methodist Infant School, I did the lessons with them. I had my own little exercise book. I had no textbooks, so I was sort of using other people's textbooks. And I did the exam and came fourth.
Fourth?
Yes.
How many were you in that class?
Oh, we were about 36. And I hadn't been to school for 5 months.
Wow.
So naturally, I was enrolled to go to Standard 1. Right. I went to Standard 1 with my colleagues, and the rest is history. So I became part of the Taqua Methodist School. And Taqua, the experience at Taqua is very thoroughly dealt with in the book. It was both interesting, good, and it had its difficulties. Taqua really started nurturing me. Though living with my parents for the first 7 years of my life was very, very important. Taqua and my grandmother, Addae-Mensah, really laid the path of my future life.
I'm going to proffer this book for you even as we continue with this conversation. My Life, autobiography of Ivan Addae-Mensah, a historical narrative. And I'm just going to do this, read a little portion, and you'll elaborate briefly on the Taqua experience. It starts from page 69. November 1949 to February 1956. That's a period of about 7 years. And you write here, Taqua was to become the next major life changer for me.
Yes.
After bringing us from Exile, the next task for Grandma Addae-Mensah, whom everybody called Mami, was to put us back into school. It was in November 1949, and the third term of the school year had already started. Master P.E. Pencil, who was the headmaster of the Methodist Junior and Senior Schools, was emphatic that he could not admit Lawrence to Standard 2 at that time of year, and that he would have to wait till the beginning of the next academic year in January and repeat the year. Grandma would have none of it. She went to the Anglican school at Abontiakun. Is that?
That's what people call Akun these days. Akun Park.
Right.
The full name is Abontiakun.
Abontiakun.
Yeah.
Known in short as Akun.
Yeah.
To see one teacher, How,
Yeah.
a Sierra Leonean then resident in the Gold Coast. The Anglican school was very far from the new layout residential area where we lived and was close to the gold mining area, the amalgamated banquet areas, or ABA for short. Grandma Addae-Mensah apparently knew the parents of Teacher Howe when she, as a child, was with her father Isaac Kwesi Emisa Sr. in Sierra Leone. Teacher Howe was the Standard 3 teacher, and it goes on and on. So walk us through this incident, because you had faced your own struggles in getting to Standard 1.
Yeah, no, to class 3.
To class 3,
Yeah.
okay. Here was Lawrence also struggling to get to Standard 2, also going through something similar.
Yeah, so
and Grandma's insistence.
Yeah,
Tell us about it.
He went to Standard 2 in Anglican school and stayed there for about 2.5 years before he was admitted into the Methodist school.
Right.
To Standard 4. So Standard 4, he spent part of Standard 4 in the Anglican school and then moved to the Methodist school when Master Pencil said that there was now a place available in the Methodist school. I had been doing very, very, very well in the Methodist school. I mean,
I'm sure from 4th, you gradually crept to 1st.
From the beginning of Standard 1, there was only one person who used to be a major challenge, a lady. She's still alive, Dorcas Bainey.
Dorcas Bainey?
Yeah, she became Mrs. Dorcas Sechi. She's still alive. And she graced the presence, me with her presence at the launch of this book.
She used to give you a bit of a tough time.
Oh, anytime. And it was fun. Anytime she beat me, I would cry and cry and cry, and she would reciprocate anytime I beat her.
She would also be upset that you had beaten her.
Yeah, but when we were in Standard 3, her father, who was a trade unionist at Taqua, Pobi Baine, those who know Gold Coast politics, everybody knows Alfred Pobi Baine. That was the daughter. Came and took her away to Secondary to go and work, to go and continue her school there. And I stayed on, so there was virtually no challenger after that until I found my way to Achimota.
I see.
Yeah.
Now, I want us to speed up a bit, talk about the Achimota experience, what it meant for you, and then tertiary education. Let's encapsulate it so that we can then move from there and talk about
okay, well, at that time there was a common entrance, which was not compulsory, but it was open to people who were in Standard 5, or it then had become middle form 1 to 4, you know, in 1952.
Which one was that, Science 7?
Yeah, that's what I'm going to explain.
Okay.
In 1952, there was this education reform which changed the school system.
Right.
Infant school and junior school were merged to become primary school. And then what was a senior school became middle school. So class 1 to class 3 and standard 1 to standard 3 became class 1 to class 6.
Right.
And then standard 4 to standard 7 became middle form 1, middle form 2, middle form 3, middle form 4. So from standard 3, I actually entered middle form 1.
Okay.
Which was the old standard 4.
Right.
So at middle form 2, where one had the chance to take the common entrance, because it wasn't compulsory, the headmaster, Master Pencil, had a lot of power as to who should be allowed to take the examination or not. And if he felt that you were not good enough, he wouldn't allow you.
It was also because the reputation of schools were on the line.
Exactly. Exactly that. So that year, we were only 2 in standard 5 who were allowed to take the common entrance. The rest were all from standard 6 or middle form 3.
Wow.
Unbeknown to me, my friend, my closest friend, was called Samuel Amu, now Dr. Samuel Amu, a former national security advisor to President Kufuor.
Okay.
He's gone back to the US. He had worked with the UN for a very long time. But he was my best friend at Taqua. We did everything together. But apparently he didn't submit his forms, even though his father was also a schoolmaster. So I took the common entrance without knowing that Amu had not taken it. Well, anyway, I had selected Prempeh College because my other cousins, the children of Mr. E.K. Datsun, who was then a deputy minister in Nkrumah's government, had taken Prempeh College. I passed, one of the very few in the whole of Taqua who passed the common entrance that year. But the one who was to be my guardian said that no. He won't let me go to a school that is only 6 years old. At that time, Prempeh was only about 6 years old, 1954. Prempeh was about only 6 years old. But I knew that it was because of money, because I didn't get a scholarship and he couldn't afford to pay the full fee. That's what I felt, but that was what he told me. Forgetting that when he went to St. Augustine's in 1936, St. Augustine's was just about 5 years old. And yet he said that he didn't want me to go to a school that was 6 years
Different
old.
strokes for different folks, but it was more financial than anything else.
It could also be that the experience he had when he went to St. Augustine's,
he was trying to prevent.
He was trying to prevent that from happening to me. Anyway, so it shows how education was very common in our family, even though there were no rich men. We really, because he was also at that time a headmaster at Esumeja Roman Catholic School.
I see.
Yeah. So he said I should wait and take the common entrance again the following year. And I took it. But when I was going to take it, my elder brother, Augustus, who had then gained admission and gone to Mfanspim, he was in Form 4 at that time, said that I shouldn't choose Prempeh, I shouldn't choose Mfanspim, I should choose Achimota.
Why though?
Well, he was having his own school fees problems at Mfanspim. At one time, he had to even go to Abidjan to see some of my grandmother Ekuemisa's brothers who lived in Abidjan to look for his school fees.
Wow.
Yeah, he was sent out of school. He had a lot of problems, but somehow he managed to finish in Mfanspim, go to Germany to do his engineering and all that.
So when he told you that, you could understand it, just as with your father, I mean, you could understand it from the standpoint of, okay, so maybe there's something he has seen.
Yeah, he didn't want me to come to Mfanspim and go through what he had gone through. But why Achimota? Why didn't he then advise me to choose a cheaper school?
Right.
It shows that he really wanted me to have the best.
Right.
And maybe also he didn't want me to be at Mfanspim at the time that he was. Because Lawrence, whom I follow, he had passed in Mfanspim, but because of financial reasons, couldn't go and had to go to Fijai.
Okay, Fijai Secondary.
Fijai Secondary. you know, for the same financial problems. Later on, he ended up in sixth form at St. Augustine's before going to Germany to do his medicine. But so I chose Achimota, went through it, and I managed to get a 50% government scholarship. And that's how I ended up in Achimota.
I see. And that must have been quite an experience. But if you're enjoying the conversation, this is Ivan Addae-Mensah. Today we are peeling a bit of a layer, some layers of his life, like an onion, right? But this one you don't get to cry. We're having this discourse with him on the sages. So far he's spoken to us about his familial background and early education. When we return after the break, we'll take a quick look at Achimota, then tertiary education and how he ended up becoming a professor of chemistry, and then from there we'll get into leadership and other matters. Do stay with us on The Sages. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We're still here with Emeritus Professor Ivan Addae-Mensah, a one-time Vice Chancellor of the University of Ghana and, of course, an Emeritus Professor of Chemistry. He's told us a bit about his life. Prof, back to, so tell us, in a nutshell, what was the Achimota experience like? How many years did you spend there?
7 years.
7 years.
Yes. But let me, first of all, elaborate a bit on some events before I actually entered Achimota School. When the results came, you know, as for the interview time and all that, let's cut that off. But when the results came, because my grandmother's younger brother, whom I said was a headmaster at Achimota School, he had become the district education secretary for the Amansie West District Council at that time. The Amansie District Council, at that time it hadn't been divided into East and West, but it was the Amansie District Council. He was the education director in the District Council. So I had to go and see him to make arrangements for going to school. And when I got to Bekwai, you know, Bekwai was then the district headquarters, he wasn't there. And I had just about 3 weeks to the closing of the admissions if I didn't pay my deposit.
Right.
And I was told
and if you didn't pay, you would miss out on the opportunity. You would lose your slot to someone else.
And that had actually happened to Augustus when he was going to Infantsbury.
Right.
And when I went, I was told that apparently, and this was a time that the struggle for independence was at its highest, and there was this Matimihon action trooper thing. And I will call him my grand uncle or my grandfather or my grandmother's brother, as you may want, Mr. Arthur. He had been beaten up by the NLM action troopers. His son was that he was an Nzima. And why should an Nzima be the district education officer for an Ashanti district council? That was his crime. He was a civil servant, a public servant, poor public servant. But the tribal thing was so strong because they said that being an Nzima, he was bound to be a supporter of Kwame Nkrumah.
Right.
And that was not strange because I myself, at the age of 9 at Taqua, I had become the constituency, constituency organizer for the CPP Youth League at Taqua.
At the age of 9?
At the age of 9. So, well, the Nkrumah thing was in our family anyway. But my grandfather was a civil servant. So Why should he be beaten? Anyway, somebody sent word that I had come. So he took the risk and came back from wherever he ran away to. I think he ran away to Cape Coast. And he came back, and I got my admission sort of ratified, and that was it. So I came to Achimota 17th February 1956. I left Taqua early in the morning, and at that time, the road from Taqua to Achimota, Taqua to Takoradi was not tarred. So by the time I got to Achimota, I was red with dust from head to toe. We left Taqua at about 3 a.m. in the morning, and we got to Achimota at about 3 p.m. I went and did the usual things, and I was put in Jamfi House, and my life in Achimota started. And if I say that Taqua toughened me, Achimota really nurtured me. I didn't just go through Achimota for 7 years, but Achimota School also went through me. I say a lot about that in the book. I am not ashamed to say that if I am what I am today, Achimota School played a very, very important role in making me what I am today.
What was it about Achimota, succinctly? What was it? Was it the discipline? Was it the education? What was it?
Apart from the academic discipline, there was the moral aspect of life, the generality of the education you got. You were really thoroughly educated to be a rounded person, and leadership by example was what I would say Achimota inculcated, not only into me, but into virtually every person of my generation. I cannot talk much about the current generation or the present generation, but at least with my generation and the generation before and a little after, I can speak to that. Leadership by example.
You say you cannot speak about this generation, but let me quickly just segue into the present. Do you feel those standards have been lost? Because interestingly, when I interview people in your, senior citizens who attended some of these very schools you've spoken about, it seems to be a thread that runs through that discipline, that moral high ground that people were urged, encouraged to be on. Have we lost that?
I think to a very large extent, one can say yes. Of course, those who are good all round, academically and everything, they still come out excellent. I cannot begrudge them that. But I think there is something missing.
What do you think it is?
I think the love of country, love of work, love of doing something for others.
Patriotism?
To some extent. Of course, we had grown up during the independence struggle time, and we had seen what our fathers and our grandparents had done. We had been part of the process, and we were proud to be Gold Coasters and Ghanaians. We were proud of the type of education we were getting. And I would say that even into the 70s and early 80s, things, one could be confident that the Ghana we wanted was the Ghana that we were building. But somewhere along the line, we started getting a bit disappointed.
Where would you think,
I would still stress that those who are good are very, very good. But I think the love of the material world has become a bit too dominant in the lives of the current generation.
If I asked you, from where do you see that decline? Where did it start from? Where would you?
I think I wouldn't mince any words. I think it started from around 82, 83.
82, 83.
Yes.
Around this time,
Yes.
we had had
Yes,
just
just when the PNDC,
the PNDC
yeah,
came in.
respect for authority was the beginning of all our, and then gradually the love for material things. And
But that's an interesting contradiction, because Rawlings himself was supposed to be a disciplinarian. In fact, interestingly, Rawlings had been in Achimota.
yes,
He had been in Achimota.
yes, but then circumstances tend to change people. You may or may not change. For quite some time, he tried to live by the tenets of his own beliefs. But somewhere, I was out of the country for about 8 years in exile. We will probably come to that later on. But by the time I came back, I saw signs that those values,
There was some decay.
yeah, there was some change in those values. And then we went into civilian rule, and all this talk about, it's a bit difficult to pin one's fingers exactly on what was happening to the country.
But at least
But
you see the malaise start from around
You
then.
see it around you, and it's just getting worse and worse and worse.
We'll come into the current day later.
Yeah.
Just let's conclude. And because Prof is an academic and such a luminary when it comes to, intellectual work, I wanted us to focus on this before we get into other issues. So I want us to conclude on tertiary education, becoming a professor, becoming vice chancellor. For the sake of time, I want us to be brief on that portion, and then we'll get into other matters in respect of Ghana proper.
Yeah, from Achimota, O-level, A-level, I entered the University of Ghana. I joined the chemistry department, and I was selected to do the special honors degree in chemistry.
Right. Was it wasn't the University College of the Gold Coast at the time?
No.
It had transitioned?
Oh, it transitioned in 1961.
Okay.
So by the time I got in 1962, we were the first batch to enter the Sovereign University of Ghana.
Right.
The University College of the Gold Coast became University College of Ghana, and then became University of Ghana. So in October 1962, we were the first batch to enter the Sovereign University of Ghana.
Right.
And I did the special honors degree, which was 4 years, as opposed to the general degree, which was 3 years. Finished it, managed to pass well enough, and then I did my master's 1 year. Because I had done the special honors, my master's took just 1 year, straight to research. I did my master's degree and gained admission to Cambridge University, where I did my PhD degree. And then after my PhD degree, I came back to University of Ghana as a lecturer.
Right. And when was this? When did you start lecturing?
This was October 1970.
October 1970.
So I went through the ranks, rose to senior lecturer, and it was when I was a senior lecturer that I ventured into a bit of politics. I wouldn't go into that now.
Is that when you served under Liman?
Yes, that's when I served under Liman. But since we are talking about my academic life, let me talk about that until I get to the present stage. So I became a senior lecturer, and then I had to go into exile because of political reasons. Fortunately, while I was in Abidjan, I applied for a fellowship, what they call the Alexander von Humboldt Fellowship. It's similar to the American Fulbright Scholarship, but it's far more lucrative than the Fulbright, and you are not taxed. So I was in Germany for 2 years, doing research at the University of Erlangen. And then after the 2 years, I went to the University of Nairobi as an associate professor, where I worked for 5 years. And then in 1990, That was from 85 to 1990. And then in 1990, I came back to Legon. And at Legon, I came back to Legon as a full professor. After 1 year, I was appointed the head of the Department of Chemistry. And that was 1991. And then in 1992, I became the dean of the Faculty of Science. And in 1996, I was appointed the Vice Chancellor of the university.
Mm-hmm. Well, that has been quite a journey.
Yeah.
Did you serve 1 or 2 terms? You
I served two terms. Yeah.
Right. How do you describe those
so
terms in leadership?
Well, they were very challenging, very interesting.
These were around the times where strikes and industrial actions and...
Well...
they were not as bad as before.
Not with the staff, but we had major problems. Well, I would say a major problem with the students. You know, when I took office in 1996, I realized that not only the University of Ghana, but virtually all the other universities were on the verge of collapse, and I mean collapse. Government finances were weak, so we were not getting our subventions. From the beginning of the University College of the Gold Coast, we were getting our subventions 5 years in advance. Then it went to 2 years, and then yearly. During Nkrumah's time, everything was okay. But we had got to a situation where, apart from salaries, even salaries, sometimes the university had to go and take bankers' drafts or take some of its investments from outside the country to pay salaries. Things were very, very bad. So I became the chairman of the Vice Chancellor's Committee of Vice Chancellors and Principals, which is now Vice Chancellors Ghana, VCG. And I put up a memo that, look, colleagues, I nearly said comrades. Colleagues, if we are not careful, the universities are going to collapse on our heads. We have to be bold enough to tell government that enough is enough. So we made, I prepared, they said I should prepare a memo. And I prepared a strongly worded memo, very, very strongly worded, with facts and figures to support. I took it to VCG. A lot of my colleagues were, you know what I mean, say, hey, this is government, oh,
you are afraid.
You have to be careful, I said, look, vice chancellors are now appointed by the University Council. The government cannot do anything to you. The only thing they can do is that when your appointment is due for renewal, they will not renew it. But if you are very convinced that what you're doing is good, and you know that it will inure to the benefit of the country, so be it. They say, well, then you can go ahead and, do it. I say, yes, I will do it. So I sent the memo to government, copied to the Council of State. And the Council of State called me to appear before them to defend the memo. Because, recently somebody read that memo and said, hey, were you bold enough to write all these things? And I said, yes, because I had the benefit. I thought that my convictions were right. Of course, I had the support of my council. Let me put it that way. My council strongly supported me because they also saw the facts and figures. And they knew that, yes, in another year or two, the universities would collapse. Not only Legon, but all the other universities. And they would collapse on our heads as the leaders of the university. And when Jerry Rawlings saw the memo, he called the then Minister of Education. That was Spugabra at the time. And he said, I support this, I support what the Vice Chancellors are trying to do. Give them all the support to push this. And that was a cost-sharing thing. That students should pay a bit and the government will pay. At the time, what we decided was that government should pay 70% of what it takes to run the university. Students will then pay 5%, and the university will meet the remaining 25% from its own internally generated funds. So that's what we took. And Rollins said he supported it. He gave us all the support. I must commend him for that. He was bold enough to say, I support it. And so the policy was implemented after Chambers was put in charge.
Even Chambers?
Yeah, even Chambers. He was then Deputy Minister of Education. And Chambers had been my tutorial student in Sabah Hall. So it was a sort of master-student relationship between us, even though he was the Deputy Minister and I was just the Vice Chancellor. But we worked very hard on it. We tried to convince parents. All parents said they were prepared to pay a bit towards their children's education and all that. But then the students rose up. That was the Mobrowa struggle.
So the 5% they had to contribute?
Yeah, they said they wouldn't contribute it. And then they started demonstrations, especially on campus. People from town came to infiltrate. And it was really tough, but we stood our grounds. We stood our grounds. And the then SRC of Legon, the president of the SRC, I got information that whilst he was urging his colleagues, let's luta, continue, blah, 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 he had paid his fees. He had paid his fees. And fortunately, he happened to, his father happened to be from Krobo, but his mother was in Zima. So he spoke in Zima very, very well. So I called him to my office, and we started speaking, talking about all sorts of things. I asked him in Zima, look, your parents, they have paid your fees, and you are here leading people to go on strike. What do you think you are doing? What do you think your parents will say when they hear this? Or what do you think the students,
if they find out?
If they find out, what do you think they will do to you? I think that contributed to the end of everything. But within 2-3 days, everything.
That was it.
That was it.
Well.
So we instituted it. And this is how or why the universities have survived up to now. Of course, now I feel that it's getting to a point where, because government is not meeting its 70%, and it's only salaries they are paying, the burden on students is getting a bit too much.
Right, including hostels,
including
accommodation
and all.
And the constant increments from time to time.
Yes, so this probably was one step or one policy that I sort of marshaled through, which to me brought a major paradigm shift in tertiary education.
Would you call that your legacy at the University of Ghana? I mean, in a minute, just very briefly. If
I think
if you felt one thing you would remember that this saved the day, what would it be?
That one, because without that, and I mince no words about that, without the cost-sharing policy, government could never have managed to run the universities. With the cost sharing, we managed to do so many other, including infrastructural development. In fact, without that, we couldn't have built the Jubilee Hall.
I see. Interesting.
And all the other halls that have been built up to now.
I see.
And
that
now,
and that would be your foremost legacy.
yes.
Okay. Now, for those of you watching, let me just do this again. I'm speaking to Emeritus Professor of Chemistry, Ivan Addae-Mensah. This is a wonderful book he's put together, his autobiography. It's titled My Life, A Historical Narrative. And he's the author, of course, as an autobiography. You should grab a copy of this because it encapsulates a lot of what we're talking about and even more. But of course, some of the snippets you're getting here, you may not get from the book as well. But now we're going to shift the gears a bit and move into other matters as well. And I want us to start from the fact that you are of a certain generation. You are of the independence generation. At the time of independence, like I said, you were some 15 years and almost 2 months old. What were your expectations of Ghana then? And if you juxtapose that with where we are now, what picture do you see? What would be your highlights of Ghana then? Or what you were expecting and where we are now?
Oh, at that time, you know, the pre-independence and immediate post-independence days, and even later, every Ghanaian was proud to be a Ghanaian. We saw Ghana as the beacon of not only Africa, but the entire black world. We were really proud of our country.
The Black Star of Africa and beyond.
We were proud of our country. Of course, later on, we started having a lot of problems with governance until the 66 coup. But the fact that we had the resources to make Ghana a great country was there, and we believed that it could be done. That can-do spirit was there. In spite of the military interventions and all that, that feeling persisted into the 70s and into the early 80s.
Even into the period of Ignatius Kutu-Acheampong, even into
yes.
the period, the initial period of Rawlings.
You can say what you like about Kutu-Acheampong. He was a soldier. You may say that the coup that he staged was unnecessary, just as others may say that Kotoka's coup was unnecessary or Rawlings' coup was unnecessary. But the policies, if with hindsight, you sit back and look at the policies that Acheampong in the first 3-4 years of his regime tried to introduce into the country. If we had followed that trajectory, probably up to now, maybe this country would have been different from what it is now.
And of course, the likes of Dr. A.O. Abudu come to mind.
Yes.
Those who implemented, who were the brains behind the Operation Feed Yourself, among others.
Of course, the Yenchia thing had its good and bad
the World
parts,
Bank and all
but
that.
it sent a signal that we can't afford to be piling up debts when we know that we have difficulties to pay those debts, that we should try and live on what we have, what we create ourselves, instead of wanting to do what we cannot do and finding ourselves in debt later on, you know.
Hold it for me, Prof, because I'll come back to you shortly on the point of debt and where we find ourselves currently. It's still a conversation with Emeritus Professor of Chemistry, Ivan Addae-Mensah. He's a former Vice Chancellor of the University of Ghana. He's a man who wears many hats. I wouldn't be able to start and finish. I told you, his CV is 20 pages long. That should tell you something about the sage I am sitting with today. But we take a breather here. I'll be right back, and then I'll get into the bit about debt then and now, and we'll talk about other leadership-related issues. Stay with us on The Sages. Here we are again, back on The Sages, and my guest, my name is Benjamin Akapu, my guest, Emeritus Professor Ivan Addae-Mensah. You were telling me about debt and how, for example, the Ignatius Kutu Champong regime was able to deal with it, whether it was a buga way or a legitimate way. But when you look at, they were trying to avoid some situations.
Yes.
If you look at our debt stock now, north of 600 billion
Yes.
Ghana cedis, and another IMF supported program and everything, do you feel we've lost it?
Well, whenever I hear people talking about debt, I hear this perennial thing, oh, debts as debts don't really matter. The important thing is whether you can repay your debts. To me, accumulating debt matters. Why should you accumulate the debt in the first place? Why can't you just try and live on what the little that you have? Why try to be ostentatious when you know you cannot support the sort of living condition that you want for yourself? And avoid these, because debts are not gifts. They come with interest. And most of the time, you are paying off the interest on the principal. And the principal is there and accumulating. Well, if even it was a situation where what we borrow is being used for what it was meant to be used for, one can sort of accommodate that, because you would expect that it would go into some investment that will yield the wherewithal for you to meet the requirements of your borrowing. But you see these debts accumulating and you don't see the reward. That's what is, that's to me what is most, discouraging about our accumulation of the debts. We have accumulated so much debt. A lot of it has gone into things that don't seem to, they are social in nature. They don't seem to yield any dividends, or the dividends are long term.
Which ones come to mind?
For example, I've talked about this for far too many times. That's the free SHS thing. I remember they said they would finance it from our oil revenue. I remember saying that oil revenue is not something that is sustainable. Oil is not something that is there all the time. One day, you are bound to borrow money to subsidize this free SHS thing. If you look at the graph now, when it started, we were able to finance the free SHS from various sources, including borrowing. Now, because of the debt burden, look at where it is now. Government is able to meet just around 50% of what ought to go into the free SHS. That is why we are having difficulty. School feeding, we started with a grant from a foreign country. And it was for a period of time. That grant period is finished. Now we have to finance it ourselves. We can't. So the children are not getting the nutrition that they need, and yet we have to pay.
Right.
You can get a whole lot of other examples.
So in other words, just to be brief on this point, our debts haven't translated into
burdens.
Haven't translated into
they have
palpable benefits for society.
For us, they have rather transposed into burdens on us.
You know, it reminds me of a story. Someone mentioned going to, is it Norway back then?
Yes.
When they struck oil.
Yes.
And how they invited the Americans to come.
Yeah.
But they had their people there learning, and they had given themselves time.
Yeah.
And once that time was up, they let the Americans go and they took over and they harnessed it for the benefit of, and we know of the fund they have for posterity when it comes to Norway and all of that. It appears we are just getting it wrong.
It is good that you have brought this up. Because, you know, I was a founding chairman of the National Petroleum Authority, NPA, and that was under Kufuor. And I was also the chairman of the founding chairman of the Petroleum Commission under President Mills. And they brought these same Norwegians to come and assist us. We set up this fund with the same Norwegian support. And at the time they brought the Norwegians, I was also the vice chairman of the PIAC, Public Interest and Accountability Committee.
Right.
But I dropped that when I became chairman of the Petroleum Commission, because I couldn't be chairman of an institution and be a vice chairman of the institution that is supposed to sort of look after the work of the Petroleum Commission. But I remember the seminars that we used to have with the Norwegians, what do you call it, the local content bill, they helped us to draft it, a whole lot of things. I don't know whether that cooperation is still going on. But at a certain point in time, after I had left office, I started hearing people saying, oh, this legacy fund that we have, why is it sitting there? And we are saying it is for posterity when we need money to do things now, to build hospitals now. And of course, the Norwegians also needed to build hospitals and build roads. But they left that legacy fund there for posterity because oil is a wasting asset. And if you don't leave anything, or if you don't invest the revenue from that into things that are perpetually giving you returns, you will find at one time that you have not done anything and you don't even have the oil also.
So to conclude on this point, I guess you would say that in places like Norway, they are more futuristic in their thinking, in the sense that they think of posterity. Here, we think of what we'll consume today and done tomorrow.
And I wouldn't mince my words. It is because some people want to make use of what is there today now to their own benefit, rather than thinking of the youth and of posterity.
Just moving away from that, I'll come back to leadership-related issues and Ghana's development, and of course, this also feeds into Ghana's development. I am curious, nowadays, maybe externally, but internally, when science is being spoken of and all of that, your name doesn't usually come up. But science goes hand in hand with, yes, STEM and everything else, and development. Why do you think that is? Do you think somehow we've lost our way? You're a professor of chemistry, you've contributed globally, but do you think we've lost our way in terms of the industrial revolution the world has been experiencing and how to really pull ourselves up by the bootstraps?
Thank you very much for this question. You know, my generation, the generation before me, and the immediate generation after me, we really did a lot to push the idea of science and technology for development. I have been involved in science as a tool for development, not only in this country, but all over the world. But you know, I've got to an age where, although I'm mentoring a lot of people, and if you look at my CV, my latest science publication is 2024. It means I'm still active in the area of science. Right. It's just that, you know, and I've been vice chairman for the science, vice president for the sciences of the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences. So I'm still involved in scientific issues. I still do some work for the World Health Organization, looking at various aspects of their work and advising here and there. But you can only do just that much. And that is if those you are trying to assist believe in what you are trying to assist in. These days I get the impression that governments that we are getting don't seem to look on science and technology as a major tool for development. Of course, we're doing a lot of talk about smart schools and all this. How much do we put into research as a country? Go to the university. A lot of them are doing their research from grants from foreign organizations.
Indeed.
And those foreign organizations will dictate the areas of where you should do your research. If even it is for neglected tropical diseases, they want to see things that they think they will benefit from, not what you will benefit from. You are not dictating the agenda. They are. But those countries that have advanced, China, etc.
He who pays the piper calls the tune.
Course.
So once they are paying you,
China
they determine where to go.
All the other countries, they have invested in science and technology. How much are we investing in? We are investing in things that don't bring any short-term, medium-term, or long-term benefits. So if some of us are not talking about science and technology a lot these days, it's because maybe we've got to a point where we don't think that our opinions matter.
Right.
Or the country itself believes in what we think we believe in.
But let me just take you back a bit, because that is the pain of many. People feel we've been patriotic, we've poured ourselves into the nation, yet at a point, maybe for the sake of politics or something else, even our ideas are, cast aside, jettisoned.
Or age.
Or age.
Yeah,
we seem to have that here as well. But let me take you a brief step back. You were with the National Petroleum Authority, the board, the Petroleum Commission. In fact, you were board chair of the VRA at a
Yes.
point.
The youngest, still on record, the youngest ever.
How old were you then?
I was 38.
38, yes. Board chair of the VRA.
VRA, yeah.
Does it surprise you then that we find ourselves in the grips of power, energy challenges every now and then? I mean, under Rawlings, we had something. Yes. Though there had been a lot of rural electrification and all of that. Under Kufuor, there was a bit. Then Mills, and then it came to a head under Mahama.
Under Mahama, yes.
Then we resolved the situation. But guess what? We're back.
We're back.
We're back there. What do you think is happening? What are we getting wrong?
I think it's management. Management and micromanagement, for that matter. I think, first of all, choice of those who lead the energy sector seems to have been too much politicized. Because from my experience, in the olden days, all those who headed our energy sector, energy sectors, irrespective of what their and in fact, they didn't even show their political, whatever you call
colorations.
Yes. It was based strictly on their technical competence. Nowadays, what we see is, if you're considering somebody, the first question that is asked, is he part of us? Or can And if you do that, and you put somebody there, another government comes, oh, this man, his sympathies are with this or that party or with this or that tribe. So you start thinking of how to remove him and put your own there. When they get there, the interest of who put them there becomes paramount. And the interest of the country is relegated to the background. And the person knows that, well, look, after all, I know that when X comes, I will go. So let me just do the little that I can. So there is no long-term interest in the leadership to do the best.
Right.
That's what I see.
But there's also the challenge, for example, of the independent power producers. So as a legacy of resolving our power crisis, the Mahama administration also left us with independent power producers. And of course, we've also had to add on to that. Now we have these debts, billions, that we owe these independent power producers. That is part of the problem.
Yeah, of course, it comes to the same debt issue that we have talked about. But
how do we resolve
Of course,
that?
that one, the levies or whatever we are paying for the power that we produce also comes in. Some people may say that we are already paying too much.
Right.
And of course, a lot of the taxes are also contributing to the amount that we pay for our power consumption. But those who are producing the power are not getting the amount of money that they require to be able to give us the full service. And of course, the independent power producers, they sort of pay all their debts in dollars. The instability in our dollar-CD ratio, whilst we pay our levies and other things in CDs, if the CD is falling all the time against the dollar, it means they will have to get more CDs. And if we are not getting more CDs, it means that they will not be able to pay their debts. And that is also contributing to the intermittent. Because as for the potential, I think we have more than enough potential for generation in the country. The hydro, the three hydros, the bit of solar, and the independent power producers, what they are producing from thermal.
Right.
I think we have enough. It's just that we are not being able to use them to the maximum. And
even
of course,
solar, I mean, even if we wanted to maximize solar,
say,
we are blessed with sunshine.
Now solar has become very, very cheap. And now solar is able to also support virtually all household appliances. You can get a solar system and even feed what you generate from solar into the national grid. But we are in such a situation that we are unable to sort of invest into that area. And even wind. There are several other ways that we can generate power at the local level, like say in the villages. We can get local generation of power that will take the burden off the national grid. So that the national grid can be put into industry and all that. So there are several things that we can do. But of course, when you are saddled with huge debts to pay, the money that you would have used for such purposes, you have to use to pay the interest on your debts.
And so that leaves you
totally incapable of doing what you need to do.
From energy, let's talk about mining.
Yeah.
You have some deep insight into that as well. You've been on the council of the university in Taqua. I mean, where I want us to focus, the scourge of Galamsey and what it's doing to our environment. I mean, some have postulated that we could easily get to the point where we'd have to import water. The Ghana Water Company Limited has told us that at a point.
That is very true. And you know, the reason why I said that people don't pay attention to what the scientists say or do in this country is a typical example. Look, scientists started warning the country on this Galamsey thing as far back as the 70s. When in the Taqua area, the Bonsa River started being polluted by people doing some small diamond and gold winning things around there. I remember Mr. Abiu of the Department of Botany going to do some work. There were several reports from the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, which is a government scientific organization. They've done a lot of work. Nobody took up these publications or warnings or reports until the situation got out of hand. It shows that government after government has neglected the warning signs over the years. If you go to CSI, you will find the reports. If you go to the University of Ghana, the work that people like Professor Gordon and others have done, it's all there. And it's not that these are not made available to government. They are made available. But let these scientists try and even get an appointment to see government, to see the minister. And it is happening. I'm not making this up. Try and get an appointment to see the Minister of Energy from the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences, to see the Minister of Education, to see the President, and see whether you will get that appointment. There is an outstanding appointment by the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences to see the Minister of Education. It's now over 4 years. They've not been able to meet. There are similar appointments to see the President. It's only when COVID came that the Academy got some, to see the Prof. Of course, the President has been to our functions, I must admit that, but that's not the same. It's not the same as having your brains sitting down and going through things with you. And I know that Nkrumah used to do that every weekend when he founded the Academy. Every weekend, Sundays, they would sit down and brainstorm on the future of the country with sound scientific and technological advice. Why is it that this is not? People feel neglected. People feel that they're just working. So now they work to publish for their promotion. That's all.
So you're saying, for example, I mean, we've touched on it in a way, but the Academy of Arts and Sciences, among others, even academic institutions at the tertiary level. Yeah. I mean, if you take, for example, the voice of some of these groupings within the tertiary circles. Take, for example, the Legon Society on National Affairs, of which you were a member. You left many administrations in trepidation.
Exactly.
Great fear.
And I was secretary to the editorial committee and secretary to LSNA during those days.
Do you think politics has so infiltrated academia now that people can't even speak up? There are people I interact with and they'll tell you something in private, but they will never dare on platforms to speak that. Do you think that is where we are now?
Well, there are some political considerations in people's attitude these days. I wouldn't deny that, but I don't think that is the full story. I don't think so. I think people have just got frustrated that no matter how much, because a lot of academics, if they are true academics, if they have facts facing them in the face, they will come out with those facts, irrespective of what their political standing or political affiliations are. But they feel that if they say anything, nobody will react.
Right.
That is the impression I get. So they will do the findings, publish, and that's it. The contamination by mercury and other things, starting from the time of
cyanide and all that.
Yes, starting from the time of Professor Amonuniza, when he was an ordinary lecturer at KNUST, even long before he became Vice Chancellor. And Amonuniza was 6 years my senior. They were writing on these things, that Taqua, Obuasi, etc., are all getting polluted. Oranges from Obuasi are getting mercury and other things into them. Who took action?
That's the question. Well, in the next 10 minutes or so, we'll be concluding on this conversation with Professor Ivan, Emeritus Professor Ivan Addae-Mensah. But I want us to speak briefly in about a minute about this wonderful book, his autobiography. And he says he's going to continue because this captures the first 40 years of his life. But this book ends with your exile.
Yes.
Tell us a bit about what is in this book, very briefly, and tell us about how you went into exile. You had been General Secretary of the People's National Party. What happened? So tell us a bit about the book first, before you get into exile.
Well, as you know, I became the General Secretary of the People's National Party. And 31st December, the coup came. It had been my tradition or my habit from childhood. If you read the book, you'll find that almost every Christmas time, I spent it with my grandmother at Taqua, even before my parents died, tragically, when I was only 7 years old. I always spent my Christmas and New Year with my grandmother at Taqua. So that period in 1981, found me at Taqua. So by 31st December, I was still at Taqua when I heard, or someone came to my house and told us that there had been a coup by Jerry Rawlings. I had a few things with me. Of course, I knew I was going to spend about 2 weeks with my grandmother before coming back to, and I was still teaching at Legon when I was General Secretary, because I was doing it part-time and unpaid. So the next morning, 1st of January 1982, I just took my car and decided to drive first to my hometown, Benin, near Nzurezo. In fact, it's the town that you get to before you get down to walk to Nzurezo. And when I got there, my various relatives, to cut a long story short, helped me, and I crossed the lagoon to the Ivory Coast side. And you know, my grandmother's relatives, most of them live in Ivory Coast, because my great-grandfather was doing business in Ivory Coast, Sierra Leone, and along the west coast of Africa. So a lot of her brothers and half-brothers were in Ivory Coast. And that's how I ended up in Abidjan, from where I eventually went to Germany, and then from Germany to Nairobi, from Nairobi back to Ghana.
Well, we thank God for your life and for making it through all of that.
And when I was going, interestingly, when I left Taqua, just out on the outskirts of Taqua, there was this army major dressed in full military regalia, and he signaled me that he wanted a lift. Somebody running into Exile when there was a military coup 1 day old. I was bold enough somehow to stop and give the soldier a lift. I asked him where he was going to. He said he was going to Atuabo, and I was going to Benin. Atuabo is just 5 miles from Benin. So I took him. We had a lot of conversation, but nothing on politics. I didn't ask for his name. He didn't ask for my name. I just dropped him at Atuabo, continued to Benin, and then across the border.
Went your way.
Yeah. Up to now, I don't even know who this major was.
I mean, you've contributed a lot to Pan-African scholarship and all of that, but nowadays, where Africa is facing the brunt of climate change, how do you think Pan-Africanism can be harnessed to deal with this issue that is a major problem globally, but especially here because we are suffering the brunt of it?
But let me ask you a question. Nowadays, does Pan-Africanism matter to any of our leaders? There are still a few of our leaders in Africa who have the Pan-Africanist spirit. But majority of... Oh, I would say that the current president of Senegal...
I knew you would mention that.
Yes, he is one.
Faye.
Yes,
Faye.
yeah.
Bassirou Faye.
Yes, I don't want to talk about the military people who have come to Niger, Burkina Faso, and Guinea, because I don't know what the future would be.
Right.
But the president of Niger, I would give it to him.
Do you mean Senegal or Niger?
Yeah, no, I said Niger. Senegal.
Senegal.
I've already said, yeah. Senegal, I will give it to him that he would qualify on my type of ticket. I may say that to some extent we have elements of it in Botswana and Tanzania.
Okay. Rwanda?
Rwanda, yes, but...
Borderline.
Borderline, because, well, I like Kagame in certain respects,
right,
but I'm not too sure where he's going to end up. Yeah. But on the whole, I'm not too sure the current leadership. There are elements of people within virtually all the countries who can bear the flag of Pan-Africans.
Right.
But they are not yet in power.
Okay. I get where you're going.
Yes.
So, of course, then it's moot to even go to the next point. But I have an interesting thought. The Third Republic had its own fortes, foibles, pluses, minuses. How do you compare the Third Republic to this Fourth Republican experience?
I would say that if the Third Republic had gone on the trajectory that it had chosen to go, we wouldn't be where we are now. That 31st December 1981 coup took us back several years.
Which truncated Liman's work.
It's not because I was General Secretary to Liman's party that I'm saying this. But I don't know whether you've read my book, The Biography of Hila Liman.
I've read a bit of it.
Yeah. If you have, you would see where the country was going and what that government was trying to do. I would say to some extent, the same thing must have happened to Buzia.
Right.
You know, before Achampong came in.
Okay.
But whereas with the Achampong one, he started post-Buzia with some very positive policies. The post-Liman period, especially from 82 to 83, it was chaotic. And I think we have not recovered. There was an attempt to try and recover for the remaining 9 years after the coup, up to the time that we went to the Fourth Republic. But as for the Fourth Republic...
And let me quickly get into that. It's also had its own challenges.
Yeah.
Who would be your best leader in the Fourth Republic and your worst leader in the Fourth Republic?
I think I will decline that.
Which leader do you feel has done rather well?
Yes, I'll give you my best, but I wouldn't venture giving you the worst. If I'm to rank first and second, I would say Kufuor and then Mills.
Kufuor and Mills.
Yeah. Unfortunately, Mills did not have enough time to get one. And I would say that Kufuor did well together with his vice president. Aliu Mahama. Not very visible, but very effective. And mind you, he was an engineer.
Right.
So the technological aspect of development was not neglected during Kufuor's time. I would vouch for that. And then Mills, I think, because of his illnesses, but he had very good support from Mahama. Let's end it that way.
Looking at the performances of former President Mahama and current President Akufo-Addo, which one would you say has done Ghana better? Done better for Ghana? Overall?
If you want me to be very honest, I would say that we all had our problems with Mahama, but with hindsight, the current situation, to me, on balance, is worse than before. Let me put it that way.
So comparatively, you feel...
I will talk about situations, not personalities.
Exactly.
Yes.
So if you look at the situation now compared to under Mahama, it was better than that.
It was better.
Now.
I mean, the CD was less than 4 CDs. Now the CD is more than 15 CDs. You know, some people say that don't look at the magnitude, but of course you have to look at the magnitude. If at that time with 3 CDs, whatever it was, I could buy a whole basket of tomatoes, and now with 3 CDs I can't even get one tomato to buy. It's what I take home with me with how much. Not talking about foreign currency, but with the local currency that I'm holding. Because the amount of money I was earning as salary has not changed much.
Exactly.
So I'm still spending roughly what I used to spend during Mahama's time, when the value has gone down considerably. So naturally, I'm suffering more now than I was doing in those days.
Right.
Forget about the leadership or otherwise of whoever it is. But if you take the situation, I would say that the situation then was far more tolerable than the situation now. And especially for senior citizens. Yes.
Let me just conclude on this. Our time is practically up.
Yeah.
Interestingly, you know, there are times I call you and we are talking about Manchester United and Arsenal and all these things in there. It's amazing. I just want to wrap on these 2 points. You even went to the extent of being a commentator on football, as far as TV and radio are concerned. You thought you were going to go scot-free. No. How did this happen? How did this passion develop? And finally, when you look around, we see a lot of plants. I even see grapes. Are those grapes?
Yes, they are grapes.
Tell us about.
And they used to yield a lot of grapes for us to make all sorts of things with them. Grape drinks. Yeah. Yes.
Red grapes?
Yeah, red grapes.
I see.
We used to use them for making. But the bees that were fertilizing or pollinating the grapes, they were getting a bit too troublesome. So we had them eliminated by the university grounds and gardens people. Since then, we've only been getting very good shade, but no grapes.
No grapes.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
And let's just wrap with the commentary.
Yeah.
Just a minute, and then we'll go.
If you read the book, you will find that I have been involved in sporting activities since I saw the world as it is from the age of 3.
I know former President Mills was a hockey aficionado.
Yeah.
What did you...
I was a hockey goalkeeper when we were playing together. I played with Mills. We were in the university team that went for the first university games in Ibadan. He was in the team. I was a member of the amalgamated clubs. I helped in all sorts of sporting activities. But the commentary thing that you asked about started, during holidays as a student. I used to work in the Ghana Broadcasting Corporation for vacation jobs. And I was usually working in the music department. But one day, the sports people heard me arguing vehemently with some people. That was during the 1964 Olympic Games when we played against Argentina. And I think we beat them 1-0 or something like that. We won one game, drew one game, and then lost heavily to Egypt. So we couldn't get to the semi-finals. We had qualified, we had gone over the first round, and we were arguing. So they realized that I was also interested in sports. But I didn't start sports commentary until I returned from my postgraduate studies. That's when, at that time, Edward Fachi was working in GBC. He was doing a lot of commentary, football, hockey, everything. And he was also a news reader. You know Edward Fachi?
I've heard of him.
Oh, yeah. He was in broadcasting all his life. And when he retired, he worked with Peace FM for quite some time.
That's right. Yes.
He worked with Peace FM after retirement, but now he's totally retired. But when we were in Achimota, in my house, Jamfi House, he was the games monitor in Jamfi House. And then he became the games prefect when he was in Upper Sixth. And I took over from him as the games monitor for Jamfi House. So he knew my sporting interests. Right. And he was the one who invited me to be a commentator with Ghana Broadcasting Corporation. And I was trained by people like Ben Egan Jr., Charles Lamte, and a whole lot of other people. And that's how I got into sports commentary. It's interesting that my son Kojo, a banker, is also better known as a sports enthusiast than as a banker. Yeah.
Well, this has been an interesting conversation. I'll just end on this point. You do want to grab a copy of this book, My Life, a historical narrative. It's an autobiography of the life up to the age of 40 of Emeritus Professor of Chemistry, Ivan Addae-Mensah.
Don't let the size put you off. When you take it up, You won't put it down.
I think some of them. So I bought this copy, and I have his autograph. So you should get it, and maybe if you let me know, I could get him to autograph it for you. But Prof, we're so grateful. I think, to all intents and purposes, if we had our way, we would have had a second installment of this. But I think what we'll do is this: when the second volume is out, the next part of your life, maybe we'll come back for part 2.
Yeah, let's hope God will give me the strength to
of course
finish it before he decides to call me to wherever he wants to call me to.
Thank you, Prof. Yeah. Thanks for accepting us into your home. And this has been our latest installment of The Sages. And of course, this is a sage. He's a treasure, a national treasure that we have. Emeritus Professor of Chemistry, author, proofreader, editor, man who has served on the number of boards he's chaired, been on the number of commissions, the work he's done, even been, had a stint in politics, been a commentator. I don't know where to start and where to end, but this has been our conversation with Emeritus Professor Ivan Addae-Mensah. I've enjoyed the conversation. I hope you did too. My name is Benjamin Akakpo. Thank you for watching.